We are this week reading Parashat Shlach, one of the more pivotal portions, actually, in the Torah. This is the portion where we go from the cusp of entering into the land of Israel into, instead, we are going to wander for 40 years. Ed, we can see you now. This is fantastic. And so one of the commentators that I was reading this week actually pointed out that up until this point, the Torah had been on one trajectory, really all moving in one direction. And then from this point through for the next 15 chapters of the book of Numbers, really it's just going to be complaint and punishment and complaint and punishment and rebellion. And only at the point where the new generation takes over do things change again. And when that happens, then suddenly the trajectory changes again. So it does seem to be not just a thematic, but almost a generational shift that happens, a national shift in mood and in situation that happens here, and then is going to happen again towards the end of the book of Bamidbar. But this week, we are looking at the spies themselves, and the question and the animating question for me as I was looking at it really was, what does it take? How easy is it to make a shift? Why do the spies have such an issue with what they see and reporting back to the people? Let's see. So the other thing that I'm trying technologically this time, and we'll see how it goes, is subtitles. So are there going to be subtitles on the slideshow? You'll let me know if it's helpful in any way.
Like a French movie or something?
I actually, according to Microsoft, they could translate me into, I think, 10 different languages. But for now, we'll just be English to English. I like that Microsoft capitalizes Microsoft.
Hebrew.
All right. I'm probably going to find these subtitles incredibly distracting for me, but you'll let me know how you feel about them on your end. So in this portion in Shlach Lecha, we are looking at the Israelites on the cusp of entering the land of Israel. Moses sends 12 spies into the land, and they come back. And of course, how do they come back? Anyone? What do the spies say when they come back?
Two of them.
Mark, what did you say?
Two of them say, let's go. We're ready to go to Israel. And 10 say, we don't want to go there. The giants, they're going to kill us.
It says, what are the spiders saying when they come back?
Those subtitles will be fun. This will add some excitement to how we understand this. What the spiders say when they come back from Israel is a very important and somewhat frightening question. So 2 of them come back and say, this is great, we can do this. And 10 of them come back and say, this is terrifying, they're going to kill us, they could eat us if they wanted to. Spiders, and now we've got antenna. I might turn off the subtitles. Is everyone okay if I turn off the subtitles? I'm finding them quite distracting. All right, that was a nice experiment.
Where is that?
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes.
Did the spiders have a website?
Well done. All right, no more subtitles. So, and what is shocking about this? What's shocking about the fact that these 10 spies, and they're the ones that we're going to talk about today, that they come back so negative and so convinced that they are not going to be able to succeed, is the text that you have in front of you right now. So this text that's in front of you now is from the Song of Songs. It's right after the Israelites cross the sea. And in this song, right, as every single Israelite is singing all together, in this song, they say out, the people hear, they tremble. Agony grips the dwellers in Philistia, which, in Philistine. Now are the clans of Edom dismayed, the tribes of Moab tremble and grips them. All the dwellers of Canaan are aghast, right? So the Israelites, as they exit the land of Egypt, as they cross the sea, they are recognizing that with God's help, they will be able to enter and to take control of the land of Israel. And so how is it that this shifts, right? What is the reason for this shift that happens? And it could be, of course, that the Israelites are flying high on this moment, and when rational thought kicks in, then what they believed when they crossed the Red Sea is not what they're going to believe later. But what we actually see in this week's Haftarah is that they were right in Exodus 15. The Song of the Sea correctly indicates what's going on. And so we see in the Haftarah this week from the book of Joshua, she, Rahab, said to the men, Joshua sends 2 spies, and this is now a generation later, after Moses and that first generation had died. Joshua is in charge. He's about to enter the land of Israel, and he also decides to send, this time, only 2 spies. Maybe he's recognized that 12 is too many and 2 can do it successfully. Sends 2 spies into Israel, and they are saved and protected by this woman, Rahab. And she says to the men, I know that the Lord has given this country to you because dread of you has fallen upon us, and all the inhabitants of the land are quaking before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Sea of Reeds for you when you left Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings, across the Jordan, whom you doomed. This comes in a little while in the book of Bamidbar. When we heard about them, we lost heart, and no man had any more spirit left because of you. For the Lord your God is the only God in heaven above and on earth below. So we see from the very beginning of the nation and of their journey that they believed that the residents of Israel were afraid of them. And we see as the Israelites actually enter the land that they're correct, that they will in fact be able to conquer, and that the people are frightened. They recognize the power of God and God's ability to do this. And so it is shocking, the words of the spies themselves. The men had gone up with him, with Joshua and Caleb, said, we cannot attack that people, for it is stronger than we. Thus they spread calumnies among the Israelites about the land that they had scouted, saying, the country that we traversed and scouted is one that devours its settlers. All the people that we saw in it are men of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them as well. And I think that this is recognizing for us that change is an incredibly difficult thing for a person to achieve. This is difficult for us in our lives. It was difficult for our ancestors as they wandered through the desert as well, right? You would look at this, one could look at this narrative and say, how stupid can these people be? God is on their side. God has done 1,000 miracles for them in recent memory over the past year and a half. That God has been doing absolutely everything, taken them out of Egypt, destroyed the Egyptian army, split a sea, given them the 10 commandments, fire and lightning over Mount Sinai, given them quails to eat when they complained, given them manna every single day, God given them water. God can do, it seems, absolutely anything, whatever God wants, and God says, go into this land and conquer it. You will be able to defeat the enemy that you face. However, I think the important thing to recognize is that they have spent the past year in this reality, and their entire lives in the reality in which they were told, you're weak, you're small, you can't possibly rise up and choose your own path in life. You are our slaves, you are beneath us, you are less valuable, you are less than. And so now the Israelites are facing a challenge. They are told one thing explicitly by God and by Moses and by Caleb and by Joshua, but their entire core is telling them something completely different. And while they try to move beyond that preconception they have about themselves, they struggle. As we read through the rest of the Torah portion, when God tells the Israelites that they are not going to be able to enter the land, that as punishment they are going to die and be in the wilderness for the rest of their lives, they say, well, no, okay, we're going, but it's too late, right? At that point, God does not allow them to enter the land. So they're trying to grow, they're trying to change, but that change is not an easy process. And so they need something, it seems to me, to help them remember the journey that they're on and the goals that they're trying to achieve. And this, to my mind, is the reason why our Torah portion ends with the passage about the tzitzit, with the passage about talit, the third paragraph of the Shema that we read every single day. And so we see in it, "V'haya lechem letzitzit uritem oto, v'schartem et kol mitzvot Adonai ve'asitem otam, v'lo tatura acharei levavchem ve'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem." That shall be your fringe. Look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them so that you do not follow your heart and eyes and your lustful urge. So the tzitzit are meant, we are told, to help us restrain ourselves, right? They're meant to, in some way, teach us the right path. And why do they need to come here? So there's a literary connection that happens here that I think explains the reason why tzitzit appear in this moment as opposed to any other. So it says, first of all, if you look, the circled word, velo taturu. You should not follow your heart. Velo taturu acharei levavchem. And this is not the first appearance of that word in our Torah portion. So we see at the very beginning of the portion, Shlach lecha anashim v'yaturu et eret Canaan. Send men to scout the land of Israel. And that word scout there is the following after your hearts that appears here in this verse. And similarly, we see here, Asher atem zonim achareihem, which is translated as in your lustful urge. Older translations will often frame it as going whoring after. You're following your baser instincts. And earlier, again, in the portion, we see that as God is threatening or condemning the Israelites to die in the desert, we see, while your children roam the wilderness for 40 years, suffering for your faithlessness. And that word faithlessness is, again, from this same word, znutechem. And so the tzitzit, it seems, are here in order to specifically remind us to have faith, specifically to remind our ancestors of the sin when they ran out of faith, when everything could have been great and they didn't quite have the internal strength to reach for it, when they hadn't quite changed enough yet. And this is the challenge that we all face in our lives, right? The challenge that we have to be able to grow beyond where we started, to grow beyond where we were, to recognize that we are able to achieve more than perhaps we think. And we need reminders. And that is one of the purposes of the tzitzit, is to remind us of our abilities, to remind us of our obligations, and to remind us of how far we can reach when we do it the right way. Maimonides, in looking at this actually, writes that it is contrary to man's nature that he should suddenly abandon all the different kinds of divine service and different customs in which he had been brought up and which have been so general that they were considered as a matter of course. He's talking right now in this passage, he's trying to explain sacrifices. Maimonides was a firm believer. Dad, you'll actually remember this. My Nora used this as her Dvar Torah in her bat mitzvah. Maimonides was a firm believer that animal sacrifice was not actually something that God wanted us to do, but it was a way for God to ease us out of the willy-nilly animal sacrifice to all the different gods. And so God put restrictions on it. God didn't want animal sacrifice. God really wanted prayer. Maimonides believed that what we're doing now is closer to God's wishes than what our ancestors did in the temple. But God needed to ease us off of it. And he continues, it would be just as if a person trained to work as a slave with mortar and bricks or similar things should interrupt his work, clean his hands, and at once fight with real giants. Maimonides is clearly referring to our portion in this moment because the Israelites believed, they were told that the people they were going to fight were giants. And so Maimonides is saying, how could it possibly be that a nation of individuals who have been slaves their entire lives could be able to stand up and go and do this? It's an impossible task. It was the result of God's wisdom the Israelites were led about in the wilderness till they acquired courage. This was actually always part of God's plan. For it is a well-known fact that traveling in the wilderness and privation of bodily enjoyment, such as bathing, produce courage, whilst the reverse is the source of faint-heartedness. Besides, another generation rose during the wanderings that had not been accustomed to degradation and slavery. And so Maimonides is saying to us that it is impossible to make a sudden and complete and permanent change in ourselves and in our identities, that we need to be able to ease into it. We need to recognize that we are going to slip as well, that we will try and change, but sometimes we will fall backwards on our old habits. But that just because we fall backwards on those habits once or twice or however many times we fall, that doesn't mean that we can give up or that we should give up. We need to continue to strive. And that's what the tzitzit are for. They are meant to be a reminder. They are a reminder to observe all of God's commandments and to be holy to God, right? That's what the tzitzit are explicitly there for. Not only a reminder of the commandments, but of our holy nature and our ability to reach and to strive beyond where we are in this moment. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, am your God. And that line I have always found incredibly powerful because it says that there is this relationship that was the goal of all of this. That God didn't simply free our ancestors from slavery because slavery is bad. God didn't simply free our ancestors from slavery for our ancestors' sake, but that God did it for God's own sake as well. That there is a connection between those two, that God had a need and the desire to be in relationship. And that was part of the reason that God took our ancestors out of Egypt. And so we need to recognize in this moment, when we look at our tzitzit, that they are a reminder of relationship. They are a reminder of what we are able to do. And they're a reminder of how far we have come and how far we can still go, that there is holiness in each of us, but that we need to strive in order to reach it. Shabbat shalom.